The other day, I came across the most absurd incident of my life. I'm sitting in the Illinois Attorney General's office reviewing prosecution cases when my assistant transfers what she calls an urgent legal complaint from an HOA legal committee. This woman is absolutely screaming about unauthorized legal services, unlicensed law practice, and violations of state bar regulations happening right in her neighborhood. She's demanding immediate prosecution and threatening to take this all the way to the Attorney General if necessary. Here's the kicker. She's literally talking to the Attorney General. Jennifer Wilson just called the Illinois State Attorney General's office to demand that Attorney General Maria Gonzalez investigate Attorney General Maria Gonzalez for practicing law without proper credentials. And I'm sitting here looking at my bar license hanging on the wall, wondering how someone can be this clueless about who they're actually talking to. I'm Attorney General Maria Gonzalez, and I've spent the last 15 years as Illinois State Attorney General overseeing legal practice standards, criminal prosecution, and civil enforcement for 12.8 million residents across 102 counties. My office on the 16th floor of the James R. Thompson Center in Chicago houses the legal authority that governs every licensed attorney, investigates legal violations, and prosecutes criminal cases throughout Illinois. The mahogany desk where I review prosecution files carries more legal authority than any other position in the state. But this story doesn't begin in the marble halls of state government. It starts in the suburban tranquility of Oakwood Heights, a meticulously planned community 30 minutes northwest of Chicago, where my husband David and I moved 4 years ago to provide our daughter Isabella and son Miguel with access to excellent schools and a peaceful environment for my home legal consultation practice. Oakwood Heights represents the pinnacle of planned suburban living. Tree-lined streets curve past Tudor-style homes with perfectly manicured lawns, community gardens, and a clubhouse that hosts book clubs, legal seminars, and monthly HOA meetings. The neighborhood attracts professional families seeking legal excellence, doctors, engineers, business executives, and legal professionals who prioritize professional achievement and community involvement. My home legal consultation practice began during the pandemic when struggling families needed personalized legal support beyond remote law firm capabilities. What started as helping neighborhood families with contract reviews and legal document preparation evolved into a state-licensed legal consultation service that serves 12 clients monthly. My Illinois bar credentials, issued by the very legal system I oversee, permit residential legal services that comply with all state legal regulations. The converted study serves as my consultation space, equipped with legal libraries, case law databases, and resources that exceed most law firm standards. Each consultation follows professional legal protocols designed to provide preliminary legal guidance while directing clients to appropriate specialized representation. Clients drive from surrounding communities seeking the legal expertise that only someone with my credentials and experience can provide. Jennifer Wilson moved to Oakwood Heights 10 months ago with dreams of becoming the neighborhood's legal authority figure. A former insurance claims adjuster with no legal background, she appointed herself HOA Legal Committee Chair and immediately began scrutinizing any activity that resembled legal practice or consultation. Her mission, clearly stated at every HOA meeting, was protecting residential property values by eliminating any professional services that might suggest commercial legal activities. Jennifer's opposition to my legal consultation practice began with passive-aggressive comments during community events. Some people seem to think they can run law firms from residential properties, she'd announced loudly whenever I was within earshot. Her complaints escalated from noise concerns, apparently client consultations violated quiet hours, to traffic violations when clients visited twice weekly. But Jennifer's real frustration stemmed from her inability to find any legitimate violations in my operation. My Illinois state bar license, prominently displayed in the consultation room, permits residential legal services. My professional liability insurance specifically covers home consultation activities. Every legal method and document I use complies with state legal standards because I literally helped establish those standards. The first official complaint arrived on a Wednesday morning while I was reviewing criminal prosecution cases at my state office. David called to inform me that Jennifer had filed a formal noise violation with the HOA board, claiming my commercial law practice violated community guidelines prohibiting business activities in residential areas. That evening, I attended the HOA meeting with my bar credentials and documentation, demonstrating full compliance with both community guidelines and state legal regulations. Jennifer stood at the podium, wearing a navy business suit and holding a thick folder that she clearly believed contained evidence of my wrongdoing. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced with the confidence of someone who'd never encountered actual legal authority, "we have a serious problem in our community. Attorney Gonzalez is operating an unlicensed law practice that violates residential zoning and creates liability issues for our families." I stood up calmly, holding my Illinois State Bar license and legal consultation certification. "Jennifer, I'm fully licensed by the Illinois State Bar to provide residential legal consultation services. These credentials permit exactly the activities you're describing." Jennifer's response revealed the depth of her legal ignorance. "Those certificates don't mean anything here. This is a residential neighborhood with specific rules about commercial legal activities. I don't care what some state agency says about your legal qualifications." The room fell silent as she essentially dismissed the legal authority that governs every attorney and legal professional in Illinois. Several neighbors, including 2 practicing attorneys who understood exactly what my credentials represented, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Jennifer," I replied gently, "the Illinois State Bar isn't some state agency. It's the regulatory authority that oversees all legal practice in Illinois, including residential consultation services." "Well, we'll see about that," Jennifer snapped, waving her folder dramatically. "I've already filed complaints with the appropriate authorities, and I intend to pursue this until your illegal operation is shut down permanently." Walking to my car that night, gravel crunching under my feet in the cool autumn air, I realized Jennifer had no idea what forces she was attempting to challenge. The appropriate authorities she planned to contact were the very people who reported to me every day at the Attorney General's office. Jennifer's campaign intensified over the following weeks with a dedication that would have impressed legal strategists. She began photographing clients arriving for consultation sessions, documenting license plates, and timing legal activities with the precision of a surveillance operation. Her detailed logs included dates, times, and descriptions of every commercial legal transaction occurring at my residence. She also launched a neighborhood petition demanding immediate action against my unlicensed law practice. The document, circulated door to door with evangelical enthusiasm, claimed my consultation practice violated state legal regulations and endangered families through unauthorized legal activities. "Attorney Gonzalez claims to be qualified to provide legal services," the petition read, "but she lacks proper certification from state legal authorities. We demand immediate investigation by the Illinois Attorney General to protect our community from unlicensed legal services." The irony was so perfect, it felt like legal comedy written by judicial satirists. Jennifer was circulating a petition demanding the Illinois Attorney General investigate the Illinois State Attorney General for lacking certification from the Illinois Attorney General. 12 neighbors signed Jennifer's petition, primarily residents who'd moved to Oakwood Heights recently and didn't understand my legal background. Jennifer proudly announced at the next HOA meeting that she'd gathered sufficient community support to pursue formal complaints with state legal authorities. "I've done extensive research on legal regulations," she declared, reading from notes that clearly came from internet searches rather than actual legal knowledge. "Unauthorized law practice violates state licensing requirements, and I have evidence of ongoing violations that threaten our community's legal standards." David suggested I simply explain my position at the Attorney General's office, but Jennifer's ignorance had created an opportunity for legal comedy that would become legendary in Illinois legal circles. Sometimes the universe provides perfect teaching moments about researching authorities before filing complaints. Jennifer's masterpiece arrived on a Friday morning, a formal complaint submitted through the Illinois Attorney General's official violation reporting system. The 6-page document, meticulously typed and accompanied by photographs of my consultation space, demanded immediate investigation of unlicensed legal practice at my Oakwood Heights address. The complainant requests urgent prosecution against Attorney Maria Gonzalez for conducting unauthorized legal services without proper certification from the Illinois Attorney General, the complaint read. Evidence suggests ongoing violations of state legal licensing requirements that endanger client welfare and violate legal practice standards. Jennifer had formally requested that the Illinois Attorney General investigate the Illinois State Attorney General for lacking Illinois Attorney General certification. The complaint landed directly on my desk through normal administrative channels, requiring my review and response as the state's highest legal authority. My assistant, Rebecca, knocked on my office door that morning with barely contained laughter. "Attorney General Gonzalez, you need to see this complaint. Someone from your neighborhood wants us to investigate you for unlicensed legal practice." Reading Jennifer's complaint while sitting in the office where I oversee legal policy for the entire state felt like being trapped in an absurdist play about legal irony. Every allegation she'd made about my lacking proper credentials could be refuted by simply pointing to the walls of my office, where my legal certifications hang alongside recognition awards from the National Association of Attorneys General. But Jennifer's complaint contained one element that transformed comedy into genuine concern. She'd copied her submission to the U.S. Department of Justice, the American Bar Association, and the Illinois Supreme Court. Her ignorance had triggered a multi-agency review that would now require formal responses from federal legal authorities. The Department of Justice's response came within 72 hours. Assistant Attorney General Dr. Patricia Chen called my office personally to discuss the unusual nature of Jennifer's complaint. "Maria, we received a complaint requesting federal investigation of the Illinois State Attorney General for lacking state legal credentials. Should we be concerned about your bar status?" "Patricia, I'm looking at my Illinois bar license right now. It's hanging next to my Juris Doctor from Northwestern Law and my Master of Laws from University of Chicago. So this complainant filed a federal complaint demanding investigation of state legal authority without researching who actually holds that authority? That appears to be exactly what happened. Jennifer Wilson called the Attorney General's office to investigate the Attorney General for lacking Attorney General certification." Dr. Chen's laughter echoed through my office speaker. This is either the most ironic legal complaint in federal history or the most thorough background check verification we've ever received. I'll respond that federal review confirms Illinois Attorney General leadership maintains appropriate certification. But Jennifer's federal complaint had inadvertently triggered something much larger than simple credential verification. The Department of Justice's review process for complaints involving state attorney general officials requires comprehensive evaluation of legal governance, policy implementation, and community legal services. Within a week, federal legal specialists arrived in Illinois to conduct what they termed a leadership effectiveness assessment of state legal authority. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, senior federal legal inspector, met with me in Chicago to discuss Jennifer's allegations and the broader implications of community challenges to legal authority. "Attorney General Gonzalez, this complaint raises interesting questions about public understanding of legal governance," Dr. Rodriguez explained, while reviewing Jennifer's detailed accusations. "When community members challenge state legal authority without understanding that authority's scope and qualifications, it suggests broader issues with legal transparency and public engagement." "What kind of issues?" "Jennifer Wilson's complaint indicates she genuinely believed you lacked proper legal credentials. That level of misinformation about legal leadership suggests we need better public education about how legal governance actually works." But Dr. Rodriguez's initial assessment quickly transformed into professional alarm as she reviewed the broader implications of Jennifer's complaint. "Maria, this case represents something much more serious than individual ignorance. We're discovering systematic gaps in civic education about legal authority that could undermine democratic governance if left unaddressed." The federal assessment team's methodology was comprehensive and unprecedented. Dr. Rodriguez's specialists conducted structured interviews with 312 community leaders, 247 legal professionals, and 523 citizens across Illinois to measure understanding of legal governance. They surveyed bar associations, civic groups, HOA boards, and community colleges to assess baseline knowledge of legal authority and licensing requirements. The data collection revealed legal ignorance that extended far beyond Jennifer's individual case. Community leaders consistently confused local legal authority with state legal oversight. Citizens believed legal licenses were issued by individual law firms rather than state regulatory agencies. Most troubling, community members routinely challenged legal expertise without understanding what that expertise entailed or who validated professional qualifications. Attorney General Gonzalez, we're discovering systematic gaps in civic education about legal governance, Dr. Rodriguez reported during our weekly briefing. Jennifer Wilson's complaint isn't an isolated incident of individual ignorance. It represents widespread community misunderstanding of how legal authority actually functions in American democracy. The assessment expanded to include evaluation of communication between legal authorities and communities they serve. Federal specialists attended bar association meetings, state legal sessions, and community forums to observe how legal information is presented and received by public audiences. Their findings were equally concerning. Legal leaders consistently used technical language and legal terminology that community members couldn't understand. State legal departments communicated policy through official documents that required legal education to comprehend. Most critically, no systematic effort existed to educate communities about legal governance, authority structures, or proper channels for addressing legal concerns. We're seeing a fundamental breakdown in democratic engagement with legal systems, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Citizens want to participate in legal governance, but they lack basic knowledge about how that governance operates. Jennifer's complaint demonstrates what happens when civic engagement occurs without civic education. Meanwhile, Jennifer's campaign against my consultation practice evolved into something approaching obsession as she struggled to reconcile her legal authority claims with the mounting evidence of her fundamental ignorance. The revelation of my position at the Attorney General's office had shattered her confidence. But rather than acknowledging error, she constructed increasingly elaborate theories to explain away the obvious truth. She began claiming that my Attorney General position was illegitimate, arguing that real legal authorities wouldn't operate consultation services from residential properties. Her logic suggested that anyone providing legal services in suburban neighborhoods must be unqualified, regardless of their actual credentials or regulatory authority. Attorney Gonzalez might claim to work for the Attorney General's office, Jennifer announced at community gatherings, but legitimate legal officials don't run businesses from their homes. Her position is obviously fabricated to intimidate community members who question her illegal legal operation. Jennifer's denial deepened when neighbors showed her official Illinois Attorney General documents confirming my leadership role. She dismissed these materials as government propaganda designed to protect corrupt officials from legitimate community oversight. These websites and documents can be easily falsified, she insisted. Attorney Gonzalez has connections that allow her to create fake credentials and intimidate anyone who challenges her authority. That's why I filed federal complaints, because state agencies can't be trusted to investigate their own corruption. Her conspiracy theories attracted a small group of neighbors who preferred dramatic explanations to simple research verification. This core group of supporters, led by recent transplant Margaret Stevens, embraced Jennifer's narrative that legal authorities were conspiring to suppress community oversight of residential legal activities. Margaret, a retired bank manager with no legal background, appointed herself as Jennifer's research coordinator, conducting internet searches that consistently confirmed their preconceived beliefs, while ignoring overwhelming contradictory evidence. Together, they developed a comprehensive theory that my consultation practice represented a larger pattern of legal corruption requiring federal intervention to protect community interests. Legal officials are using their government positions to operate private businesses while intimidating citizens who attempt to enforce community standards, Margaret proclaimed at HOA meetings. Jennifer Wilson is a whistleblower, exposing systematic abuse of authority that threatens every family in our neighborhood. This core group of conspiracy supporters provided Jennifer with the validation she needed to continue her campaign despite mounting evidence of its absurdity. They organized petition drives, attended community meetings, and maintained detailed documentation of what they termed legal authority abuse in Oakwood Heights. Dr. Rodriguez's assessment expanded beyond my individual case to examine how Illinois communicates legal policy and leadership to communities statewide. Her team interviewed attorneys, legal professionals, and community leaders across 8 counties to understand public perception of legal authority and licensing requirements. The results were both enlightening and concerning. 78% of community leaders couldn't correctly identify the role of state attorneys general. 67% didn't understand bar licensing requirements. Most troubling, 51% believed anyone could file complaints challenging legal professionals without researching actual qualifications or regulatory compliance. Jennifer's ignorant complaint had accidentally exposed a statewide crisis in legal civic engagement and public understanding of how legal systems actually function. Meanwhile, Jennifer continued her neighborhood campaign with increasing desperation as she waited for state authorities to validate her legal expertise. She organized additional HOA meetings, focused exclusively on my illegal law operation, and invited other residents to share concerns about unlicensed legal activities threatening property values. Attorney Gonzalez thinks she can ignore state regulations just because she lives in our community, Jennifer announced at the emergency HOA meeting she'd called for Thursday evening. But I've filed official complaints with multiple agencies, and they're investigating her unauthorized legal practice. Mrs. Patterson, a retired paralegal who'd worked in Illinois courts for 42 years, stood up with visible frustration. Jennifer, Attorney Gonzalez is the Illinois State Attorney General. She literally oversees legal licensing for the entire state. That's what she claims, Jennifer replied dismissively. But I've done my research on legal regulations, and her credentials don't meet state requirements for residential legal consultation services. Jennifer, I worked under Attorney Gonzalez's legal policies for 10 years before retiring. She wrote the legal licensing requirements you keep citing. The room erupted in surprised murmurs as neighbors began understanding the absurdity of Jennifer's crusade. Several residents pulled out their phones to search Illinois State Attorney General, while others simply stared at Jennifer with growing awareness of her monumental ignorance. That's impossible, Jennifer insisted, her voice rising with defensive panic. State legal officials work in government buildings, not neighborhood consultation services. Attorney Gonzalez is obviously lying about her qualifications to avoid legal consequences. Mr. Henderson, whose family receives legal consultation from me monthly, stood up holding his phone. Jennifer, I'm looking at the Illinois Attorney General website right now. Attorney General Maria Gonzalez is listed as state legal leader with a biography describing her 15 years of legal leadership. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt like the entire room was collectively holding its breath. Jennifer's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. That can't be right, she whispered, grabbing her own phone with trembling hands. I filed complaints with the Attorney General's office. They're investigating her for unlicensed legal practice. Jennifer, Mrs. Patterson said gently, you filed complaints asking Attorney Gonzalez to investigate Attorney Gonzalez for lacking Attorney Gonzalez's certification requirements. The community meeting dissolved into awkward conversations as neighbors processed the revelation that their HOA legal committee chair had spent months challenging the highest legal authority in Illinois for lacking legal authority. Several residents approached me with apologies for signing Jennifer's petition, while others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Jennifer gathered her folders and rushed from the meeting without speaking to anyone, her face flushed with embarrassment that would soon transform into something much more serious than social humiliation. The federal legal department's investigation continued expanding as Dr. Rodriguez's team discovered that Jennifer's complaint represented a pattern of community misunderstanding about legal governance that extended far beyond Oakwood Heights. Their research identified similar conflicts in 23 other Illinois communities, where residents had challenged certified attorneys without understanding regulatory authority or professional qualifications. Attorney General Gonzalez, we're recommending a statewide legal transparency initiative, Dr. Rodriguez announced during our follow-up meeting. Jennifer Wilson's complaint has highlighted significant gaps in public understanding of legal leadership and licensing requirements that could undermine legal authority if left unaddressed. What kind of initiative? Community education programs explaining how legal governance works, who holds legal authority, and how bar licensing actually functions. Jennifer's case demonstrates what happens when communities operate on assumptions rather than actual knowledge of legal systems. The federal recommendation triggered the Illinois Legal Transparency and Community Engagement Act, requiring state legal departments to provide annual community education sessions explaining legal governance, leadership roles, and licensing processes. The law mandated that communities receiving state legal funding must participate in governance transparency programs designed to prevent future conflicts based on legal misinformation. Jennifer's ignorant complaint had accidentally created federal legal policy that would improve public understanding of legal authority in all 50 states. But Jennifer wasn't finished with her campaign against my legal qualifications. Despite overwhelming evidence of her mistake, she doubled down on her position with the determination of someone whose identity had become attached to being right about legal regulations. She filed additional complaints with the Illinois Supreme Court, claiming I was using my position at the Attorney General's office to intimidate her and suppress legitimate concerns about residential legal violations. Her new strategy involved portraying herself as a whistleblower, exposing corruption in legal leadership. Attorney Gonzalez is abusing her government position to operate illegal legal services while threatening community members who question her authority. Jennifer's complaint to the Supreme Court claimed, "This represents corruption of legal leadership and intimidation of citizens exercising their right to report regulatory violations." Chief Justice Sarah Mitchell's office contacted me directly to discuss Jennifer's allegations. Chief Investigator Michael Torres explained that corruption complaints involving Attorney General officials require thorough investigation regardless of their apparent merit or lack thereof. Attorney General Gonzalez, we understand this situation involves some unusual circumstances, but we need to formally review any allegations of position abuse or community intimidation. I understand completely. My consultation practice operates under normal state licensing requirements, and I have never used my Attorney General position to influence community discussions about legal services. We're particularly interested in the timeline of events. When did your neighbor first become aware of your role at the Attorney General's office? Jennifer filed her original Attorney General complaint requesting investigation of my legal credentials before learning I was the Attorney General. Her complaint literally asked me to investigate myself for lacking my own certification. Chief Investigator Torres paused for several seconds. She filed a complaint with the Attorney General demanding investigation of the Attorney General without knowing who the Attorney General was? That's correct. Jennifer researched legal regulations but didn't research legal leadership. She knew enough to file complaints, but not enough to identify who would receive those complaints. The Supreme Court investigation concluded within 3 weeks with findings that bordered on legal comedy. Jennifer's complaints contained no evidence of corruption, intimidation, or abuse of authority. Instead, they documented a citizens' campaign against legal expertise based entirely on ignorance of legal governance. The Supreme Court's report was copied to the Federal Department of Justice as supporting evidence for the National Legal Transparency Initiative that Jennifer's original complaint had accidentally triggered. Meanwhile, Oakwood Heights was experiencing its own transformation as neighbors grappled with the revelation that their community's legal conflict had escalated to federal policy development. The HOA board called a special meeting to address what they diplomatically termed community communication challenges regarding legal services. HOA President Robert Kim opened the meeting with carefully chosen words. Recent events have highlighted the importance of understanding professional qualifications and regulatory authority before raising concerns about community services. Tonight, we'll discuss how to improve communication and avoid future misunderstandings. Jennifer attended the meeting, but remained silent as neighbors discussed the broader implications of her legal crusade. Several residents expressed concern that their community had gained statewide attention for challenging legal authority without cause, while others worried about potential legal consequences for filing complaints based on misinformation. Mrs. Patterson, ever the legal professional, stood up to address the underlying issues. This situation teaches us that expertise and authority matter, especially in legal practice. Before challenging someone's qualifications, we should research what those qualifications actually are and who has authority to evaluate them. Mr. Henderson added, Attorney Gonzalez has been nothing but professional and patient throughout this entire situation. She could have ended Jennifer's campaign immediately by simply mentioning her position at the Attorney General's office, but she allowed the legal process to work naturally. The meeting concluded with unanimous approval of new HOA guidelines requiring residents to verify professional qualifications and regulatory authority before filing formal complaints about community services. The guidelines specifically mandated research verification for any challenges to professional expertise or licensed activities. Jennifer's legal ignorance had transformed Oakwood Heights into a model community for evidence-based civic engagement and professional respect. The Illinois Legal Transparency and Community Engagement Act was signed into law with provisions requiring annual community education sessions in all districts receiving state funding. The law mandated that communities learn about legal governance, leadership roles, licensing requirements, and proper channels for addressing legal concerns. I was invited to testify before the House Judiciary Committee about the legislation's importance. Representative Davis, this law addresses a critical gap in public understanding of legal authority. When community members challenge legal expertise without understanding that expertise, it undermines the professional relationships essential for effective legal governance. Attorney General Gonzalez, what specific problems does legal misinformation create in communities? Jennifer Wilson's case demonstrates how assumptions about legal qualifications can escalate into federal investigations, policy development, and community conflict. When citizens operate on incomplete information about legal governance, it wastes resources and damages professional relationships. How does this law prevent similar situations? By requiring communities to learn how legal systems actually work, who holds legal authority, and how to properly address legal concerns. Legal governance works best when communities understand and respect legal expertise rather than challenging it based on assumptions. The legislation passed with bipartisan support and became a national model for improving public understanding of legal governance. 27 other states adopted similar transparency requirements based on Illinois' experience with community legal misinformation. But the implementation of this groundbreaking legislation required comprehensive development of legal education materials, training programs, and assessment tools that would transform how legal authorities communicate with communities nationwide. The Federal Legal Transparency Initiative, funded with $67 million in congressional appropriations, established regional centers across all 50 states to develop and deliver community education programs. Dr. Rodriguez was appointed as National Director of Legal Transparency, coordinating the development of standardized curriculum that would educate citizens about legal governance while respecting local community characteristics and needs. The curriculum development process involved legal leaders, community organizers, civic education specialists, and communication experts from law schools across the nation. Attorney General Gonzalez, we want Illinois to serve as the pilot program for national implementation, Dr. Rodriguez announced during our planning meeting. Your case study will be used to train community educators in all 50 states, demonstrating how misunderstanding of legal authority creates conflict and how proper education prevents these issues. The pilot program required development of interactive workshops, online resources, community forums, and assessment tools that could effectively educate diverse community audiences about complex legal governance concepts. My experience with Jennifer's complaint became the foundation for case studies that would teach millions of Americans how legal authority actually functions. Community education sessions began in Illinois 9 months after the law's passage, with mandatory participation for all HOA boards, civic organizations, legal associations, and community leaders in districts receiving state funding. The first session in Oakwood Heights attracted 53 residents, including several neighbors who had supported Jennifer's campaign and wanted to understand how they'd been so thoroughly misinformed. Mrs. Patterson, now serving as HOA legal liaison, opened the session with characteristic directness. Tonight, we'll learn how legal governance actually works so we can avoid future situations where community members challenge expertise they don't understand. Recent events in our neighborhood demonstrate why this education is essential. The 4-hour workshop covered legal authority structures, bar licensing requirements, state and federal oversight responsibilities, and proper procedures for addressing legal concerns. Interactive exercises allowed participants to practice identifying legitimate legal credentials, understanding regulatory authority, and distinguishing between evidence-based concerns and assumption-based complaints. Margaret Stevens, Jennifer's former supporter, participated actively in the workshop with visible embarrassment about her previous involvement in challenging my qualifications. I supported Jennifer's position without researching Attorney Gonzalez's actual credentials, she admitted during the session. This workshop teaches me how to verify information before making serious accusations about legal professionals. The community response to legal transparency training was overwhelmingly positive as residents gained understanding of how legal systems operate and how their community could effectively engage with legal authority. Property values in Oakwood Heights increased by 14% as families sought neighborhoods known for valuing legal expertise and evidence-based civic engagement. The success of Illinois' pilot program accelerated national implementation of legal transparency requirements. Within 2 years, all 50 states had established community education programs based on the Illinois model, reaching an estimated 4.7 million citizens annually through workshops, online resources, and civic education initiatives. Legal transparency training became mandatory for HOA board members, community leaders, and civic organization officers in communities receiving federal legal funding. The National Association of Attorneys General endorsed the program as essential professional development for anyone involved in community legal oversight. But the personal transformation of my family during this experience extended far beyond policy development and community education. Isabella and Miguel, now 13 and 11 years old, had witnessed their mother's professional expertise challenged by ignorance and ultimately vindicated through evidence-based investigation. Their understanding of how expertise and authority function in democratic society became sophisticated far beyond their age. "Mom, why didn't Jennifer just look up your job before complaining about your legal practice?" Isabella asked during one of our evening conversations about the ongoing community changes. Sometimes adults make assumptions instead of doing research, especially when they're angry or frustrated about something they don't understand. "But you always tell us to research our homework topics before writing papers. Why don't adults research their complaints before filing them?" Miguel added his own observation with typical 11-year-old directness. Jennifer was like a student who writes a legal brief about laws she never read and gets mad when the judge knows she's wrong. Their insights demonstrated how children can grasp fundamental principles of evidence-based engagement that adults sometimes struggle to understand or apply consistently. Isabella and Miguel became informal ambassadors for legal transparency as they explained to friends how research and verification prevent conflicts based on misunderstanding. David's involvement in developing digital platforms for community education sessions had evolved into a consulting business that helped legal authorities nationwide create accessible online resources for civic engagement. His technical expertise, combined with my legal knowledge, generated innovative approaches to explaining complex governance concepts through interactive tools and visual resources. The Wilson case study, as it became known in legal circles, was incorporated into graduate programs in legal administration, public policy, and civic engagement across the nation. Law schools use Jennifer's complaint as a perfect example of how individual ignorance can trigger positive systemic change, while demonstrating the importance of research verification in democratic participation. Dr. Patricia Chen, now Assistant Attorney General for Legal Transparency at the Department of Justice, regularly referenced Jennifer's case in national conferences and policy development meetings. The Wilson complaint represents both the problem and the solution in community legal engagement, she explained to the American Bar Association. Individual misinformation created federal policy that now educates millions of citizens about legal governance. 5 years after Jennifer's original complaint, the National Legal Transparency Assessment documented remarkable improvements in public understanding of legal authority. Community challenges to legal expertise based on misinformation decreased by 73% in states implementing transparency programs. Citizen engagement with legal governance increased by 48%, as communities gain knowledge about proper channels for addressing legal concerns. The assessment also revealed that communities with active transparency programs showed improved relationships between legal professionals and local residents, increased participation in legitimate legal oversight activities, and enhanced support for legal funding and policy initiatives. Jennifer Wilson's criminal trial proceeded through the Illinois court system with media attention that transformed her case into a cautionary tale about the legal consequences of filing false government reports. Prosecutor Lisa Chen used Jennifer's case to establish legal precedent for prosecuting citizens who knowingly file fabricated complaints with state agencies. Ms. Wilson's actions demonstrate that democratic participation requires honesty and good faith engagement, Prosecutor Chen argued during closing statements. Citizens cannot abuse government complaint processes by filing reports containing fabricated evidence and false statements without facing criminal consequences. Jennifer was convicted on 3 counts of filing false reports and sentenced to 24 months of community service, $25,000 in fines, and mandatory participation in civic education programs. The judge specifically required her to complete 60 hours of legal governance training and write a public apology acknowledging her misconduct. Ms. Wilson, your actions wasted government resources, damaged community relationships, and demonstrated contempt for truth-based civic engagement, Judge Robert Martinez explained during sentencing. This sentence reflects society's expectation that democratic participation must be based on honesty and evidence rather than fabrication and assumption. Jennifer's public apology, published in the Oakwood Heights newsletter and regional newspapers, became part of legal transparency curriculum used nationwide. Her acknowledgement of error and explanation of lessons learned served as powerful testimony about the importance of research verification before challenging professional expertise. I filed complaints against Attorney Gonzalez without researching her qualifications or understanding legal governance, Jennifer wrote. My assumptions and misinformation created conflict that could have been avoided through simple verification of facts. I apologize to Attorney Gonzalez, our community, and the government agencies that wasted resources investigating my false complaints. The ongoing impact of Jennifer's misguided complaint continues rippling through legal policy and community engagement practices nationwide. The Illinois model for legal transparency has been adopted by the Department of Justice as recommended policy for all states receiving federal legal funding. Professional development programs for legal leaders now include training on community engagement, transparency communication, and conflict prevention through civic education. The National Association of Attorneys General requires annual training on community relations and transparency practices for all Attorney General staff. My legal consultation practice expanded to serve 28 clients monthly as families throughout the Chicago metropolitan area sought legal support from someone with verified state-level expertise. The federal investigation's confirmation of my qualifications became an unofficial endorsement that attracted clients from 15 surrounding communities seeking legal services from demonstrated authority. The success of my consultation program inspired development of the Illinois Certified Home Legal Network, connecting families with state-licensed legal professionals who provide residential consultation services under standardized quality assurance protocols. The network, now serving 1,247 clients across Illinois, represents a new model for community-based legal support that combines professional expertise with neighborhood accessibility. 6 years after Jennifer's complaint, I received the National Legal Leadership Award for outstanding contribution to legal transparency and community engagement. The award ceremony, held at the Department of Justice headquarters in Washington, D.C., recognized leaders whose work had improved public understanding of legal governance. Attorney General Gonzalez transformed individual conflict into national policy that benefits millions of American families, Attorney General Dr. Michael Rodriguez announced during the ceremony. Her professional response to community misinformation created legal transparency initiatives that strengthened democratic engagement with legal systems nationwide. The award included a $35,000 grant for continuing legal transparency research, which I used to establish the Legal Authority and Community Engagement Research Center at Northwestern Law School. The center studies how legal professionals can most effectively communicate with communities while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries and authority. Isabella and Miguel, now 15 and 13 years old, serve as youth advisors for legal transparency initiatives, providing student perspectives on how civic education can be effectively delivered to young people. Their involvement demonstrates how family experiences with legal conflict can inspire next-generation civic leaders committed to evidence-based democratic participation. Standing in my consultation room today, reviewing applications from families seeking legal support from verified professional expertise, I'm surrounded by recognition awards, policy citations, and letters from communities nationwide implementing legal transparency programs inspired by Jennifer Wilson's complaint. The irony remains profound and continues generating positive change. Jennifer Wilson's attempt to challenge my legal authority based on ignorance of that authority accidentally created the most comprehensive legal transparency initiative in American history. Her ignorant complaint became the foundation for federal policy that now educates millions of citizens about legal governance annually. The plaque on my wall, commemorating the Illinois Legal Transparency and Community Engagement Act, bears an inscription that captures the essence of this entire experience. Dedicated to improving public understanding of legal governance through evidence-based civic engagement and professional respect. What started as one neighbor's ignorant complaint about legal credentials became a national movement improving how communities interact with legal authority. Jennifer's false assumptions about my qualifications triggered systematic reforms that now prevent similar conflicts through proactive education and transparent communication. Every month, I receive reports from communities implementing legal transparency programs based on lessons learned from Jennifer's complaint. Legal departments across the nation now require annual sessions explaining legal governance, leadership roles, and proper channels for addressing legal concerns. The Wilson Protocols, as they are known in legal administration, establish standard procedures for handling community challenges to legal authority through verification processes that protect both professional expertise and legitimate citizen oversight. These protocols now guide legal leaders nationwide in managing community relationships while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. Dr. Rodriguez's final federal assessment report, published as Legal Transparency and Democratic Engagement, Lessons from the Wilson Case, became required reading for graduate programs in legal administration, public policy, and civic administration. The report documents how individual misinformation can accidentally trigger positive systemic change while demonstrating the critical importance of civic education in democratic society. 7 years later, the legal transparency movement inspired by Jennifer's complaint has expanded beyond legal governance to include community transparency initiatives for governmental services, professional licensing, and civic engagement broadly. The Wilson case study is now taught in universities as a perfect example of how professional expertise, democratic accountability, and civic education can work together to strengthen community governance. And every time I review prosecution cases in my Chicago office, I smile remembering the day Jennifer Wilson called the Illinois Attorney General to demand investigation of the Illinois State Attorney General for lacking Illinois State Attorney General certification. That, as we say in legal practice, remains the perfect teachable moment about the importance of research verification before challenging professional expertise. Sometimes ignorance accidentally creates wisdom, but only when professionals respond with patience, evidence, and commitment to civic improvement rather than personal vindication. The transformation continues daily as communities nationwide implement legal transparency programs that turn potential conflicts into opportunities for civic education and professional collaboration. Jennifer's complaint taught us that assumptions about authority can be dangerous, but proper research and evidence-based evaluation create stronger legal relationships that benefit everyone involved. What's your worst HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else going through the same battle. Hit that subscribe button if you love seeing bullies get what they deserve, and ring that notification bell for more HOA Revenge Stories, where justice is served ice cold. Remember, sometimes standing up to neighborhood tyrants doesn't just save yourself, it saves everyone around you. When good people refuse to be intimidated by fake authority, entire communities can break free from fear. Thanks for watching HOA Revenge Stories.